Rob, thanks so much for joining us. And, we're a couple weeks in now. You've been down there in Florida. What's the vibe been like this year?
Good vibe, man. Good vibe, Joe. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And it's the highlight of my spring training. But I will say this, is that going through these spring trainings the last few years is definitely a different dynamic, because I remember when it flipped over from you walk in that clubhouse in spring training and there was this cavalcade of stars and people you want to talk to. And then for the last few years, not bad guys, but really it wasn't the marquee names and the guys who were going to drive the bus in terms of conversation and whatever paid views or whatever it is. And that was a very noticeable thing throughout the past few years. This year, whether it's because Alex Bregman, whether it's because Garrett Crochet, whether it's because Walker Buehler, whether it's because of Rafael Devers said to spice things up, all of it, totally different dynamic. But the most important thing for the Red Sox is that I think for a first time in a long time, they legitimately feel like they are in the big boys club again in terms of being considered for the World Series. And
being a part of that big boy club, Rob, is having a lot of people talk about you. And that's been the case for the Red Sox once again with this offseason. And you hit on one of the big storylines, the Rafael Devers, Alex Bregman dynamic, who's going to play third base. And there was a lot of hoopla about that last week. But I wanted to ask you, where do things stand as it's related to the third base situation and who will ultimately play there?
I think this is a cop-out, but it happened so early in camp. Like, we get so wrapped up in spring training and trying to take every single moment and make a big deal out of it, which is, the great thing about baseball. We do that during the regular season too. But it happened so early, you could see that they could slow play this a little bit. And so I do think that probably the best scenario is the Gold Glove guy at third base. One of the best hitters in baseball is a DH. And then, I think you have some really strong candidates at second. But, I can't say that's exactly what they're going to do. I think a big part of this, which I think people are missing, is that, you want to see Rafael Devers, when he plays third base, go out and be able to do it. Yeah, no question about it. I've seen Rafael Devers have some really good defensive spring trainings. But this time, all eyes are going to be on him. If he makes one error, everyone's going to be like, oh, there it is. And what I was going to say is the other part of this is the second base, is that if a guy like Grissom steps up and all of a sudden looked fantastic offensively, defensively, and I will say this, he looks dramatically better than he did last year, then they're going to prioritize that, I think. They're not going to sideline a Grissom who's really, really good and say, no, forget about it. So I think that also factors in.
And you hit on Grissom right there, Rob. And Vaughn is a guy that feels like actually forgotten about a bit, because so much of the talk has been about Christian Campbell. Where do you think the Red Sox see him as it's related to second base, knowing that Bregman could be playing there a bit? And on top of that, you have this other kid, Christian Campbell.
Yeah, the Christian Campbell one's an interesting, because I think when we went to camp, we heard so many people say they love this kid. They love this kid. This kid is, I know that he has a lot of hype, but it's for a good reason. He's ready to go. He's in competition, and he very well may be in competition. But I think early on, what we've seen is that I think they're giving the first chance to a guy like Grissom and even David Hamilton. The early spring training games, Christian Campbell has either come in very late or hasn't played at all. And even on the backfields, when they first started rolling out the infield drills, it was Grissom getting the reps with the first teamers and Christian Campbell coming in after. So if I had to guess right now, they're saying, hey, we have time. Maybe Christian Campbell starts in the minor leagues, see if he can continue the momentum he had from last year. And if he does, then he'll force the issue a little bit. But I do think that as we sit here right now, the first chance be above Christian Campbell is probably going to go to Vaughn Grissom and David Hamilton.
And, even if he doesn't make the majors to start the year, Rob, that being Christian Campbell, there has been so much talk about the big three, him, Roman Anthony, Marcelo Meyer. Jeff Passan just put out an article today about those guys and obviously what they could be for the Red Sox. How much is riding on these three players to be successful?
Well, I think that not this year. I mean, I think that if it's a bonus if they contribute to the major league team this year. But going forward, obviously, I mean, these are star level players. These are perceived as foundational players, and that's what, when we talk about building a team, that's what you have to have. And they kept telling us, well, we don't need to trade for that guy. We don't need to sign this guy because we have these guys come out. These are going to be the foundation. Now, I think ultimately they realized, no, we kind of have to get the Alex Bregmans of the world and the Garrett Crochets of the world. Why we get these other guys? You can't wait too long. And I'll give you examples. See, when the Dustin Pedroias came up, when the Mookie Betts came up, when the Xander Bogaerts came up, it wasn't like they were perceived as the foundational guys. They were perceived as the guys who were going to hit ninth and work their way up. Pedroia, his Rookie of the Year, 2007, he was hitting ninth, and he was terrible his first month. But it was okay because you had all these other guys around him. I think this is one of the things that makes this spring training probably one of the more interesting ones that I've covered in a long, long time, is because we can focus on Bregman, we can focus on Devers and Crochet and everything else, and all the while you have some of the top prospects in baseball sitting there, and every time they take the field, you're wondering how good are they going to be on this stage, and all of it. I mean, you have everything. You have the stars, you have the prospects, you have the drama. It's really, really this. I don't want to say once in a lifetime, but a once in a long, long time spring training.
Yeah, and there's so much about it that's so intriguing. It's been, even through the first 2 weeks, so much fun to just follow along, even if there are parts of it, if you're a Sox fan especially, you want figured out, like third base. And Rob, one thing that has been lurking in all this, it's not a huge deal right now, but it is something that I wanted to ask you about, is the health of the rotation. Because Cutter Crawford has been talked about a ton. He's been dealing with tendonitis in one of his knees. Brian Bello was shut down in camp early with soreness in his throwing shoulder. He's obviously working his way back. But what's your level of concern for the rotation right now, with a couple of guys seen as stalwarts not having the best start to spring training?
I think what it is it's a reminder of the reality of baseball, of starting rotations, of pitching staffs, because you come into it and you say, oh my goodness, 6-man rotation. Oh my goodness, embarrassment of riches. It never works out that way. It never does. And I think this was the early reminder. Now, when you talk about Bello, I think he's going to be okay. I don't know, maybe he takes a turn for the worse, but there is, I think, a sense in camp that he can catch up. He's not that far behind. He's going to be able to, at least in the first couple of weeks, contribute in the starting rotation. And if you can't, you have other guys. You have Richard Fitz, you have Quinn Priester. That's another luxury they have. Cutter Crawford's a different story. I think Cutter Crawford, they're worried about. Cutter Crawford is, they had an MRI. It came back okay, but still, he's not doing a lot. You see him walk, you see him run, you hear the reports. This is not going to be something where he's going to be ready for opening day. And we look at Cutter Crawford and we think, oh, well, you get all these other guys. But Cutter Crawford was a good pitcher for them for a long time. And so anytime you take out a good pitcher, you just can't expect next guy is going to be as good as he is. So anybody is going to, it should be a concern. And the other part about this, Joe, is that, we can say you still have all these guys, but let's look at this through the lens of not being quite as optimistic. Lucas Giolito, you don't know what you're going to get. Garrett Crochet has done 1 year as a starter. You don't want, as good as he's looked, you don't know what he's going to get. Walker Buehler finished a year strong, but you don't know what you're going to get. Tanner Houck, wore down at the end of last year. You think you know what you're going to get, but who knows? And again, Bello. So they're not alone. I mean, all teams are like this. I think they're positioned better than they ever have been, or a long, long time. But it is, to come back to what I said, it is a reminder of the realities of season.
Yeah, and that's why, Rob, I've picked the Red Sox, at least as of now. I think I have a couple more weeks to make this full decision. But right now, I have the Red Sox winning the East, but I'm not doing it as confidently as maybe one would hope, just because of the reasons that you laid out, because there's a little bit of uncertainty. But it's obviously an interesting spot where this team is in. The bullpen is another question mark, but Rob, Luis Guerrero has been really good to start. 2 scoreless innings, 5 Ks in his outing so far. What have you made of him, and I guess just that unit right now where things stand?
There's a lot of guys. I mean, this is when we're trying to do roster construction and opening day roster and projections and everything else, good luck with the bullpen. And that all goes all the way to the closer. You look at who's going to close out games. I don't think it's as simple as Liam Hendricks, go get him. I don't think that, it shouldn't be. I mean, the guy hasn't pitched in a long time. To expect that he's going to be the best version of himself is a reach, is a stretch. You hope he is, but you don't know. Justin Slayton, sure, he has great stuff, but he hasn't closed. Aroldis Chapman, I don't think anyone wants to see him close on a regular basis just because you don't know if he's going to throw strikes. To me, the guy that I honestly, if he's healthy and as good as they say he looks, I would want to see close is Garrett Whitlock.
Yeah.
I want to see him close because I've seen him close. I've seen him be the best version of himself. So that's one element. And then you mentioned Guerrero. Go down the list. Guerrero, Zach Kelly, Josh Winkowski, Brennan Bernardino, Matt Moore, Adam Ottavino. I'm going to forget a bunch of other guys. You have, you have, Sean Newcomb, Austin Adams, these guys, there's and I've used this example, Joe, and nobody probably cares or is going to care to take the time to envision this, but to give you an idea of how the spring training roster looks, just understand when you walk into the Red Sox clubhouse at JetBlue Park, always, every year that I've covered, it is very, very simple. You have the pitchers to the right, and you have the hitters to the left. This is the first time ever that there's so many pitchers and so few hitters that pitchers are integrated with the hitters. Robert Stock's down there, some other guys. You never see that before, and it's because they have loaded this roster full up of pitchers, and what they're hoping is that a lot of these guys who might not make the team actually decide to hang around in Worcester to give them that depth.
Yeah, a lot of depth in the bullpen. Rob, before we let you go, I got to ask you this final question. In relation to the Alex Bregman signing, how excited were you about it, knowing that it brought the Red Sox from an odd standpoint higher for Alex Cora to get a baseball isn't boring tattoo on his body?
Yeah, I mean, the list is growing long, and you can jump on board if you want, Joe. That we got Cora now, if they win the World Series, getting the baseballs and boring tattoo. Pete Fassi, the hitting coach. Brian Abraham, the farm director. I mean, I think Cooper Boardman, your guy, he's agreed to do it. You're going to agree to do it by the end of the day, I'm sure. But listen, if you know that I'm getting a tattoo, that I'm making that commitment, the person who has 0 tattoos, who said they're never going to get a tattoo, and all of a sudden I show up with this huge baseballs and boring tattoo on my arm, that I think anyone can do it. And I think everyone's seeing that, not only with the Red Sox, I think through the world of baseball. My goal is to have a baseballs and boring tattoo on every arm.
I will have a decision for you by day's end, Rob, I promise.
I don't believe you. But anyway, I believe everything else you say. But hey, if you want, I can convince you by the end of the day.
All right, sounds good, Rob. Appreciate the time again. Rob Bradford, host of the Baseball Isn't Boring podcast, Audacy podcast. You can also catch him on WEEI as well. Rob, thanks for the time.
Thanks, Joe.